Good afternoon. I'm Vicki Westling with City Speaks, and City Speaks is a show that is a vision of Mayor Rosas. It is a show that is to provide transparency and information to our residents in the city of Dunkirk and in our surrounding area. And today we're fortunate to have a very special guest who is also a member of the media, Dave Rowley. Dave Rowley is the news director of WDOE. So, Dave, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. This is really a treat for me because you are absolutely one of the best, you know, in the business, and you've been around for 40 years?
Yeah, 40 years. I've been in broadcasting actually 1978 and started at a radio station that is no longer around, WBUZ in Fredonia.
Okay.
And I started doing part-time work.
Now, what did you do?
I did a little bit of everything. You know, I did some announcing, did a music show, did some news, and it's funny because my intent was not to get into the newscasting business, but was to do a morning show.
Okay, so were you a journalist? Was journalism your...
It was part of it. It was part of it. Actually, more communications. There was not a specialty program or degree at SUNY Fredonia. At the time, it evolved into a communications program.
Okay, and of course, you talk about a morning show. You do have a morning show on WDOE. You have Viewpoint.
Yeah, we do Viewpoint, 8:45 to 9 o'clock, and I do the news throughout the morning. So my day starts early, about 3:30. That's when I get up, get into work around 5 o'clock, and I'm there till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
So now, on your Viewpoint show, you have people from all over, every genre coming in. You have a psychic.
Well, that's not my program per se, but Greg Keene, he's on from 8 to 9. He works with Dan Palmer, our morning show guy, and he's been there for over 40 years.
Dan, yes.
Yeah,
Dan's certainly the voice.
He's an icon.
Absolutely. You have done some interesting things and some interesting broadcasting. You've covered a lot of different kinds of stories, and we've talked a little bit about that. Tell me, of the stories that you've covered, which one do you think was the most interesting or exciting and impactful, certainly, to our area?
I think it was the Bucky Phillips, the escape of Bucky Phillips, and eventually his capture, because Bucky Phillips was a native of Chautauqua County, and this is a story I've not told on the air before, but I rode the same school bus as Bucky Phillips for 1 year.
So City Speaks has breaking news.
Yeah, so you actually have a breaking news story, but I rode the bus for about a year with Bucky Phillips.
How old were you when you did this?
12, probably 11, 12 years old. We were on, it had to be 11. Yeah, probably 11.
Well, now that was, of course, when that all was coming down, everything, the whole area was practically in lockdown because you couldn't travel anywhere without seeing the state police or sheriff or city police or somebody, you know, all the checkpoints. And
especially when there were the 2 state troopers that were shot.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the one trooper who passed away from his wounds, they were serious enough. And I think that's when this went from being, you know, people were not very serious about it. They viewed Bucky Phillips almost as a folk hero of sorts. It got very serious after the shootings that took place.
I remember that time, and it was certainly one of the ones that, you know, made you stand up and take notice, especially there toward the end, like you say. Now, some of the other things that have gone on in the city that you have covered.
Well, there's been a lot of different stories that we've covered, a lot of the groundbreaking in recent years, you know, with Wright Park and Point Gratiot, some of the improvements going on, some of the very chilly days too that we were out there.
Well, that's true.
But some improvements to the city, and it's why our job is interesting. You really don't know what to expect every day. I have covered shootings, I've covered homicides, I've covered major fires, and yet you also cover stories like groundbreaking. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a variety. That's what makes it an interesting job.
Well, you're speaking of groundbreaking, and certainly here in the city of Dunkirk, especially in the last 3 years under Mayor Rosas' administration, it seems like there is a groundbreaking every week.
There seems to be, and usually on a Friday too.
I know. Why do we do that?
Yeah.
But of course, the most recent one was the cold storage warehouse.
Yes,
I believe, and like you said, we had both parks. But you also do some other things for the city. You MC our parade, Memorial Day parade, and you know, one of the things that happens, we're always receiving compliments, and I get calls on a regular basis, and the mayor gets calls on a regular basis about the good things that happen in the city, and certainly you're one of them. So,
really?
You know, and so he knew that you were going to be on today, and he asked that I convey to you his personal gratitude and thanks, because he does get the calls, and you do participate. You're at every meeting. You're at all the different places. So those things are really, that's important that the city, the residents hear from you. All of the guests that you've had some interesting guests. Tell me about who was your most influential guest.
Gosh, I got to think about that one. That wasn't on my list of questions.
Well, you see,
it's been quite a variety. We've had city leaders, we've had county leaders, we've had debates, we've done political debates. We had the candidates running for county sheriff. We've had the mayoral candidates on. So it's an interesting show. I think it gives people kind of an idea, what are the issues in the community, where do we need to improve, where have we improved. You know?
So let me ask you those questions. What are some of the issues that you hear about in the community?
Well, they vary. Obviously, the opioid epidemic is a serious issue. It's one that's ongoing. It's one that involves so many different facets. You have the law enforcement component. You have the treatment component. It is a story that is ongoing. It has not ended and is still being dealt with.
Right, and it's one that, you know, we've continued to have individuals who die because of this.
Every day.
Every day.
Literally. And it's something, it's almost like cancer. It almost touches everyone in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. It really does, and it really brings it home when you have friends or relatives, or you know of people who have passed away personally. It really does. It really makes a difference. So that's certainly something that's going on. We also have things that have happened in our city that you've covered. We have certainly our waterfront, and now we're going to have our Winterfest and on February 9th, and you're going to be covering that. What are you looking for?
Well, looking for a good turnout.
Yes.
And I think the other key when you talk about a Winterfest, you know, you're showing that the city can offer so much year-round. I think people think about this 9-month window, actually, you know, 3-month window during the summer. And I think a Winterfest kind of expands that and it makes it more 4 seasons.
Right, and of course here we have the lake right out here, so we need to utilize that year-round if we can. So this is our first year, so we're looking for a good turnout too, and I know that you're going to be there for a big part of that. When we talk about your career, we talk about you're the not only do you handle the Viewpoint, but you're the news director, is that correct?
Right, yeah, news director. So I'm in charge. I oversee, the content of the newscast. And of course, now we're more and more in the social media. So we're doing Facebook Live type events, and we're doing updates on social media. We have a website, shouldtalkwithtoday.com. That's had quite a few followers.
So now, tell me a little bit about that. Shouldtalkwithtoday.com, and so people can go on, can look at that, and they find out what's happening, what you're reporting on. What other, can people interact with that?
Yeah, they especially on social media, on our Facebook pages. We have Facebook pages, Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I tweet. Of course, my tweets are not as profound as some political people, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
You can kind of figure that out. Yeah. But it's another way to reach your audience and to get feedback, especially Facebook.
What kind of feedback do you get after you have someone on, especially when you have one of the mayoral candidates on?
We get it depends on the discussion. It depends on the topics that you're talking about.
So, and you talk about the Facebook chats, right? Are you doing those live?
We do Facebook Live, so we cover events, such as I've done snowstorms, the like effect storms. I did updates during this police-involved shooting in nearby Fredonia. I did some reports from the scene.
Now that had to be something that was pretty spectacular to cover that. I mean,
it was a very difficult story, because when you're arriving at the scene, you're not allowed in. 20, 30, 40 years ago, police procedures were a lot different. Of course, you didn't have the technology where you could actually go on Facebook Live and do live things, but I think you could get more information back then. Now you treat something as a crime scene a lot differently than you did 30, 40 years ago. People are not tracing all over the scene, so you're held back. And the amount of information you get it just kind of comes in as a trickle. We had to wait several hours before we could get really any specific details about that event, so that the police could conduct their investigation. Of course, you have people that are listening to our Facebook Live and our radio updates, and they're saying, well, why don't they have more information? Well, they're trying to determine the course of the investigation.
So your reporting has changed dramatically, it sounds like, over the...
It has. We're in the digital age. So we're not just doing radio, but we're also doing social media. We're also trying to get information. You're getting feedback at that time also, which you can do with Facebook. It's a great tool. Yes. There's a downside to social media, but there's an upside. If you're in the media, it can be a source of information. However, you have to do your due diligence. You have to verify the facts. You can't just go with something that someone gives you on Facebook. But it's a tool.
Well, right. It's kind of like Wikipedia.
Yeah.
That...
Exactly. It's low-level research. It's not high-level. Right. It's a good source, but it's a beginning point.
Right, and so we really do have to be careful. And I have some of that same issue that people will say, I read this on Facebook, or I saw this on Facebook, and I'm thinking, wait a minute.
Yeah, what is it?
Let's make sure that we know.
Is it rumor? Is it fact?
Sure, yeah. So those are the kinds of things that we have to be careful of, especially in your line of work.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, WDOE has changed over the years. How many people do you have now that you work with?
We got approximately 10, and that probably includes part-time or full-time people. We have part-timers who we depend on immensely, just like full-time. You have we call them board ops. They're producers of our remotes. We do a lot of games. Dan Palmer, Greg Larson. Greg is kind of a multi-talented guy because he does news, he does sports. Really, his background is in sports, and he's become very valuable to our news team. We have Tina Zabak, who covers a lot of the Common Council meetings at night, school board meetings. So, you know, we have a staff not entirely full-time, but it's just as important as the full-time people.
So how do you assess the way the station is today as compared to how it was when you started, and where do you think it's headed?
Well, I think it has changed immensely because back in 1992, I joined in 1992. I was working in the Jamestown market for 7 years. The stations that I worked for acquired the two stations, WDOE. It used to be WCQA, and now it's WBKX or Kicks Country, which most people know. But anyway, back in 92, the building was the same, but the equipment is just totally changed. We've gone from analog tapes to digital. Everything is digital. You don't use tapes anymore. We had a system that had commercials on cassettes. Everything was on tape, reel to reel. You know, you don't see reel to reel anymore.
Many people don't even know what you're talking about when you say reel to reel.
Or cassettes. Or carts. We call them carts, cartridges.
Okay, now you've lost me.
Yeah. Well, they look like 8-track tapes, the old 8-track tapes, except they're 2 tracks.
Okay, so now everything is digital. Where do you see the station going in the future?
I think radio is still the most compact vehicle for getting information. You just press a button. You don't have to turn a computer on necessarily, although we do streaming. So you can catch us at yourtalkwithtoday.com. We have apps for both WDOE and Kicks Country. So, you know, there's many different ways. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, you know, and I see us continuing to grow along those means.
And so now when we look at the at WDOE as certainly the city's radio station, I mean, this is who we go to if we have breaking news or press release or whatever. I send those things generally to you.
Yes, you do.
So you're our hub, our station in this area. And how do you manage to get out and to cover everything?
Well, you network. You know, we network with people in Jamestown so that we can help get information out. We have good contacts with law enforcement, such as David Ortolano, the police chief here in the city of Dunkirk, and I've known Dave for a good long time. And you network. That's how you get information. Also, you can glean information off Facebook. Again, great tool. Something is happening, sometimes you see it on Facebook, so you have to make phone calls. You have to get a hold of people.
Okay,
you know,
so
and communicate.
So where it used to be when we see in the movies where they're reading things off the ticker tape or whatever it might be, you're now...
Yeah, that's kind of the old times. You know, there, in fact, very few radio stations now utilize wire services. We've gone more to home brew news, local news. We're not using quite as much state news stories because local is still, you know, it's the most important.
Right.
Absolutely. We listen to police scanners, you know, we hear what's going on out in the community, and also we get phone calls from people if we miss something.
Right, and of course everything in the news is local. That's what people really
Yes.
want to hear about. Although you do have some national news. I know when I listen to it, you have, I think it's ABC that comes on
ABC,
first
we're an
and
ABC affiliate.
gives us the national news and lets us know if there's anything pressing happening.
And that's true, because some of the national stories, this partial government shutdown is starting to have a major impact with HUD, and the city of Dunkirk is
Sure.
an entitlement community, so it gets HUD dollars. Eventually, that is going to affect some of the city operations, which is something we're going to be tracking. That's one of the, I'm sure, upcoming stories.
Right. So, and you talk about the partial government shutdown, and certainly that must have some impact on how the information gets to you as well, because I'm sure that there's things are kind of tight-lipped now in Washington, where it's what's happening, what's changing. So it must be difficult to kind of pull out any kind of information on that.
Yeah, that's where we depend a lot on ABC News. And we also, once a week, there's a conference call that area Congressman Tom Reed has, so we usually take part in those conference calls, and we can actually ask him and get a more local angle to this partial government shutdown. But it's like anything else, you know, you have to get many different sides. We hear from Senator Chuck Schumer. We get a lot of the information from Senator Schumer's office with ABC News, since he is now one of the top ranking officials at the federal government. So it's a case, yeah, all news is local in a sense.
Right.
Even a federal story can have a local angle to it.
Right, and we now have our junior senator from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand.
Yes, quite an announcement. I know there were reports surfacing up until her appearance on Stephen Colbert's program.
So things are happening, and we do get the news, and it does come to you. Have you heard anything from our local farmers or the grape industry? Because I know that our farmers are really starting to say, wait a minute, we need information, we're not getting the things that we need. And then, of course, we've got the FDA, all of these things that are being impacted by this government shutdown that you mentioned. Are you getting any feedback? Are people calling you about this and saying, have you reported this, or what's happening?
We're getting a lot of people that are asking questions about it, and the difficulty is because the federal government has so many layers and so many agencies, it's tough to always be able to get some answers. Right.
So, you know, I can understand how that can be a problem. Have you talked with our county executive, with George Barillo, how we're being impacted on the county level?
Right now, not as major, but I think if this shutdown continues, I think everyone is going to feel some effect.
And now he's he's a regular guest on Viewpoint.
Yeah, he was
not?
on the program on Monday.
Okay. And you didn't ask him that question?
My show was focused more on the state of the state, actually, at that point.
Right.
And I think I did get a question in about the partial shutdown. I don't think it's having a tremendous effect yet, but I think down the road it will.
Right. So we're going to begin to feel the pain here pretty shortly,
especially when you're talking about the airports. Because both the Dunkirk and the Chautauqua County Airport in Jamestown, they have federal funding that is connected.
Right, and so of course, you know, there's always grant applications that are going to be impacted as well. So, with all the things that you have done, what has been the most interesting? The most interesting?
Well, I find every day is interesting. You know, it's that news story that comes across the wire, across the phone, that really grabs my attention, probably. So the focus is on that.
So
that's probably the most exciting.
Really, okay, but there's not one thing that stands out.
Probably not, because it's almost a blur. You know, you go from one day to the next. You get done with one newscast, you start looking, okay, what's the next? So you're always looking ahead. You don't have, when you're talking about news, especially with the electronic media, you're always looking for the next thing, and you're really not thinking about necessarily what you've done in the past. So I'd have to sit down and think about it.
Okay. Now, we talk about, let's bring it back to just the city of Dunkirk.
Sure.
Because we have done so many things, and because so much is going on, and because we're really featuring our waterfront, we're making Dunkirk a destination.
Yes.
That's what we want to have happen. What kind of changes have you seen that you think are the positive changes, and what are you looking forward to for this next upcoming summer?
Well, I think the positive changes are you're seeing more activity in the city. And as you mentioned, along the waterfront, there is a lot more activity that's taking place. I think that's the real positive. That's the upshot. And plus, if we see a Phoenix, which is not in the city, but it's right next door, the synergy from the opening of Phoenix in 2020 is going to be really exciting, because that could jumpstart a lot of projects and development.
Well, and of course, I think that we have the Battery Point Villas that are coming, and I don't think that would be happening if a Phoenix were not here. So,
right.
That is
literally almost right across.
Almost exactly, yeah. So, but Battery Point Villas will be in the city of Dunkirk. Phoenix, of course, is in the town, but they are neighbors because they're right there in front of one another. So that is happening. Also, the expansion of with Philbrook Foods.
Right, the cold storage facility that will lead to more expansion, we hope.
Right. So from the economic development point of view, that's really coming along. Another big thing, a story that had to be have significant impact for you was the fire on Central Avenue.
Well, yes, that was a huge story, because I spent a few hours at night in the cold chasing down people, interviewing people. And of course, that happened in 2010, and that's before, the advent of like Facebook Live.
Right.
We would have been doing a lot more Facebook Live at that point. It would have been a really long night. We did some radio. In fact, there was I believe, a basketball game, a sporting event that the station had on the air at the time that this fire came down. So that was a crazy night. That was a big story. And that's a story that still plays a big role today, because it has had an impact on the city of Dunkirk and Central Avenue. And I know the mayor, when he was on our program earlier this month, indicated that Central Avenue is one of his priorities, trying to get more activity, get more business in that area.
Yeah, we really want to focus on our downtown, because this is the time that, as I've spoken with the mayor and with our development director, that certainly because we are working on our waterfront, working on these other areas, that the focus really now is going to be shifted to our downtown. So we're going to look to have you there for lots of coverage for things happening.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be significant. Now, when we talk about all of the other things that have happened, we've had some big events come to play, some big media events. Certainly, I have to mention the Race World, the offshore boat races.
Right.
And that now is just going to be huge. We've got them now for 2 more years.
And the I Love New York.
The I Love New York. That is great. So things are definitely happening in the city of Dunkirk. And we're beginning to partner. Fredonia is beginning to come in and say, we'll do more, we'll partner more
Central Connection.
with the Central Connection.
Yes.
So that area is big now. So that's going to be something that's happening. So the reach out in the community has really been a positive, and certainly WDOE and you have been a part of that, not only because you cover it, but because you are actually a pillar in our area. You're somebody that we really look forward to making these things known to the rest of the residents.
Absolutely.
What other kinds of things do you think would be important or interesting for our viewers, our listeners, for people to know?
Well, how do you, in what terms?
Well, in terms of what of WDOE's place in the community, how your outreach is into the community and into the area.
Well, I think we continue to be a big booster of this area, and we continue to work with the business community. I think that's the big key, promoting events and trying to get people here, to stay in the area. We see so much about the exodus of people not only in Chautauqua County but upstate New York, and there are opportunities here. And again, with smaller businesses, it's not just with big corporations anymore. It's keeping our local business community dynamic and energized.
Right. We definitely need to maintain our current business base.
So that's what I see as one of the most important areas, and certainly how the radio station can be part of that community and part of that solution.
Well, you can count on us to continue to go to you. We'll let you know what's happening from our end, and as much as you can do to help us promote the city of Dunkirk as a destination and all of Chautauqua County.
Absolutely.
Because that's why we're here. And that's what City Speaks is about. This show is absolutely for our residents. This show is a vision of Mayor Rosas to make the residents aware of what's going on. So City Speaks can be shown daily, 3 o'clock and 10 o'clock on Spectrum 1301. You can view it anytime on DunkirkAccess.com, YouTube, watch any of the shows. And so thank you, Dave. I appreciate having you here. Please come back.
I will do it again.
I hope I didn't make it too tough.
No, you were very good, very fair.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you for watching City Speaks.